Hello, everyone. I am Tim Hagan, the library's Adult Services Coordinator. We are so glad that you decided to join us here tonight for another installment in our Authors Series Online. I want to start by thanking our presenting sponsor, the Library Legacy Foundation, for their generous financial support. Gifts to the foundation allow the library to remain a constant and positive force in our community. I also want to acknowledge our presenting media sponsors, the Blade and Buckeye Broadband, our supporting sponsor, the Bureau Group, and our community sponsor, the Friends of the Library. Their continued support helps make these programs possible, and for that, we are grateful. Also, as we transition to the new normal of virtual programming for the time being, I'd like to mention 3 upcoming adult events. This coming Monday, the 27th, from 7 to 8, please join us for Cooking with Vibrant Vegan. And then I'd also like to mention 2 upcoming book events. The first one is in partnership with the Toledo Metro Parks. At this book discussion, we'll cover Bill Bryson's A Walk in the Woods. That is Wednesday, the 29th, from 7 to 8. And then the second book group that I'd like to mention is the first of 2 events featuring a new book group, and is focused on Black Lives Matter. They will be discussing Layla Saad's Me and White Supremacy. That is Thursday, July 30th, from 7 to 8. This program is being recorded tonight, and the recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. We have staff monitoring the Facebook Live and the Zoom chat functions, so please send in your questions. Now, let's get started. I am pleased to introduce our moderator for the evening, our Executive Director, Jason Kuchma. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Tim. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Jason. Any other words to share right now?
No, that's okay. Let's introduce our guest.
Okay, thanks, Jason. And now to our featured author for the evening. Brad Thor is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 20 thrillers. He has appeared on ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, and many more to discuss terrorism and how closely his novels parallel the real threats facing the world today. In his latest book, Near Dark, the world's largest bounty has been placed upon America's top spy. Scott Harvath's only hope for survival is to outwit, outrun, and outlast his enemies long enough to get to the truth. Brad graduated cum laude from the University of Southern California, where he studied creative writing, film, and television production. Prior to becoming a novelist, Brad was the award-winning creator, producer, writer, and host of the critically acclaimed national public television series, Traveling Light. Welcome, Brad.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Brad, how are you? It's good to see you.
I'm good. It's nice to see you. And Jason, there's something that you don't know about me that I think we cannot begin tonight unless I inform everybody who's watching us in the Toledo area of my local connection. So I married a girl from Sylvania.
No way.
Yeah, so that's where my wife is from. So it's kind of neat.
That's incredible. How long ago has she lived here?
Oh, it was a long time ago. She went through grade school, I think, and then her dad took a job in Detroit. So she moved to Detroit, high schoolish age, if I remember correctly. But she said, "Remember to mention the Blade because that's the newspaper we got." So yeah. So I used to go down there to see her grandparents. So they actually lived in Toledo. They had moved from Sylvania into Toledo. But so I've spent some good times in Toledo. I like Toledo a lot.
That's incredible. You know, one of the greatest things about Toledo, there are many things, but the Mud Hens, and it's heartbreaking that we don't get to watch some good minor league baseball this year, unfortunately. Yeah. I live in Sylvania. I had never. I have some roots here in Ohio and in Northwest Ohio. When I moved back here, ended up in Sylvania, and it's great. It's a great place to live. So that's amazing. I had no idea. You have written many books.
I have.
You have been on many book tours, but none like the one you're doing right now, right?
No, and actually, I also, isn't it Tree City Catering that did the food tonight if you wanted to get dinner with the book? So I want to give this is the only event, folks, that I'm doing like this where you had the opportunity to get the book and dinner brought to you. And so all the events I've done for the release of Near Dark have been wonderful, but this is like the most unique event, the coolest event. And so this is the one I've really been looking the most forward to. So you guys are very creative there at the library.
Well, thank you. We are at their tables right now, perhaps, or in front of their couches. They're enjoying a good meal, but I'm going to have to wait on dinner for a little while. Yeah, it's an interesting model. We have not done this before, and I hope it takes off a little bit. It's nice have that delivery right to your home and watching a great author speak.
And by the way, this is the last time. I'm sorry, Jason, I'll interrupt you. For you folks,
No.
I understand that the menu was lasagna bolognese, Caesar salad, and chocolate chunk cookies. So anybody who has not completely devoured their dinner and can take a picture and post it on my Facebook page, I want to share this event far and wide tonight. So I would love to share this because it's so cool. And I think this should be the model of all the other book events that I do going forward. I love dinner and a book. I think it's so cool. So if you would come to Brad Thor on Facebook and share any photos you have of your dinner, I would love to have them. So
I love that idea. They can tag, they can go to your page and also tag the library. I would love to see some of those photos as well.
Yeah.
That's perfect. And no better way to get other people on board than to see other people enjoying a good meal. Yeah. So you're in Chicago now, yes?
No, actually, we moved 6 years ago from Chicago down to Nashville, Tennessee. So I live in Nashville now.
That's right. I remember that. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. So tell me a little bit, like, this is not your normal book tour, right? You're
no,
sitting in front of a computer instead of in studios.
Yeah, so there's a silver lining to it. The hard part is I don't work for the publisher. I work for the readers. They are my bosses. And so I look forward to getting on the road every year to see the people I work for. I have new fans, old fans. We do photos and I sign books and we chat in person. I mean, my events take hours because I want to connect with everybody that comes to one of my signing things. So it's tough not to have that personal, physical connection because I really love that. Because I was a reader, Jason, well before I ever became a writer. So with reading, we have a shared love of books. It's a language we all speak when we love to read. So I miss talking about, what are you reading? What are you reading? What are you reading? I get some of my best book ideas when I'm on book tour of what I should pick up next. The neat thing about this, though, the silver lining, as far as I see it, is that there's a lot of people who would love to come to an event like this, but it's a Friday night. It's been a rough week. I'm tired. I don't necessarily want to get in my car and drive down to the library as much as I love going to the library and they've got great events. But you can do it online, which is really neat. So I'm hoping that we have the ability, and we are tonight, touching more people virtually than had I been there and people had to hop on the bus or jump in an Uber or whatever and come down. So I'm hoping that that's the upside of this, that we're reaching more people than ever before. So.
Yeah, I agree. We've been talking a lot about how one of the silver linings is the fact that people are getting used to this Zoom technology, these different sort of web conferencing things, where you would have had to grab them kicking and screaming to get used to it prior to this. So now it's sort of part of our day-to-day life. Before I jump in, I have a couple of questions. I want to talk to you. We'll chat for about a half hour or so, and then we'll open up to see what some of your fans would like to know from you. We're not going to replicate that handshake and the hugs and all those too.
That's
I
okay.
Wish we could.
Yeah, me too.
And that's it is an incredible part of some of our author events. We've hosted hundreds and hundreds of authors here, and just see folks line up to get their signature and those autographs and to chat with the authors is pretty remarkable. So it's a reasonable facsimile we'll work with right now. Okay.
Sure. Yep.
So I'm new to. Well, first of all, I have to beg your forgiveness. I went to high school with a guy named Scott Horvath. So if I ever say Scott Horvath throughout this entire conversation,
happens all the time. Horvath is a really interesting derivation. So most people have heard Horvath. So a lot of folks, if you go, I won't correct you. I'm a guest at your house. You do what you want, Jason. So go ahead.
I also saw someone on Twitter said that they were a huge fan of your books and they really love the Scott Harvard series. And I said,
yeah, and you know what? Whenever I see Scott Harvard, I know that somebody dictated that, because that seems to be the default when you speak it into your phone. It seems to be Harvard that comes up. Yeah.
That's great. I'm new to the series. I picked up Spy Master, read that pretty quickly, and I'm working my way through Near Dark. It's incredible. For folks who are not familiar, how do they pick up? How do they jump into a series like this that is 20 books deep?
That's a great question. So I tell people that my thrillers are like the James Bond movies. You don't need to have seen any of the other ones to enjoy the latest Bond film. So there's 19 in the Scott Harvath series, and then I did a spin-off one year called the Athena Project, which was about an all-female Delta Force team. And Scott Harvath has a cameo in there because my publisher insisted that he be in there so that we could pull the lovers of Scott Harvath into that book. And it actually made a lot of sense. They complete an op, and he's there to, they hand him the intel, and then he goes, and then it's just about the ladies going forward. So you don't need to have ever read one of my thrillers before to jump into Near Dark. You can totally do it. You can do what Jason did, which is start with Spy Master, which was 2 summers ago, read Spy Master, Backlash, and Near Dark. In fact, if I was going to make a 3-book set of any of my recent work, those not only are the most recent, but those 3 fit together really well: Spy Master, Backlash, Near Dark. But Near Dark is probably one of the, you'd think after writing 20 novels it would get easier, right? And it doesn't. It actually gets harder. And I think that's probably because my dad's a Marine, no longer active, and my mom was a flight attendant for TWA in the 1960s. And they were both entrepreneurs, and they both taught me, don't ever rest on your laurels, don't take anything for granted, and treat every day on the job as if it was your first day. And if you weren't really good, it could be your last day. So when I wrote Near Dark, the new book, it was fun. I knew that I wanted to raise the bar, which I try to do with each book. I try to give readers a better book every single time. I spent a lot of the off season between books reading books on writing. I mean, I've written 20 novels, but I'm still a student of writing, still trying to improve myself. I read other writers. I read books about writing. So with Near Dark, I took a lot of risks. And what's funny about being an author, Jason, is there's no instruction manual. There's nothing that says, make sure you do this by page 15, this by chapter 7. So when you're taking risks, and I took a lot with Near Dark, there's nothing to make you feel comfortable in those risks, to say, you're doing a good job, keep it up. You don't know. You really are creating order out of chaos, and you don't know if it works until it's all done and you've put it out there and given it up. So I'm actually really happy. This Near Dark is the best critically acclaimed book that I've written. Last year, Backlash, it won a bunch of awards last year, Backlash, and people said, I don't know how he's going to top it. And those same critics this year said, oh my God, he topped it. And it's because of the risks. It's because I'm going outside my comfort zone, I think.
Can you talk about any of those risks without giving away anything for folks who haven't? Yeah. What are some of the things that you dug into?
Absolutely. So if Near Dark was a movie and you and I were designing the movie poster, the tagline would be the $100 million bounty has been placed on the head of America's top spy. That's the tagline. So when we open up in Near Dark, it's funny. We're going to have fun tonight. I'm going to pull back the curtain for everybody watching. Last year, or actually more than a year ago, as I was getting ready to write last summer's book, Backlash, a big book retailer came to us and said, hey, we're hearing things about Backlash. It sounds really cool. Would Brad do an extra chapter for us, a bonus chapter, so that in our stores, we could have a special edition? I'm a small business person. I grew up in the Midwest. Like I said, my mom and dad are entrepreneurs, and my answer to anybody who works with me is always yes. If I can help you be better, if I can help you excel, if it's going to result in more sales, yes, 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 yes. So yes is a really dumb thing for an author to be saying before they've even sat down to write their new book. So I got to the end of writing last year's thriller, Backlash, and I sewed everything up, nice bow on it, all the plot lines were all taken care of, snip, 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 everything's tied up, perfect. Turn it in, I'm feeling pretty good, and my editor goes, okay, what are you going to do for that bonus chapter? And I went, oh, No, it doesn't. I said it doesn't need a bonus chapter. It's complete. Backlash is perfect. It does not need a single sentence more. And she told me, she goes, well, that's too bad because you promised a bonus chapter for this special edition. And I went, ugh. And so I said, okay, I'll get it for you. Give me a week and I'll come back to you with something. And I was talking to my kids, and my children love the Marvel movies, Jason. And we always have to sit, for those of you who have not seen a Marvel movie, or for those of you who have, you're going to know this part. But if you haven't seen a Marvel movie, you have to sit through the credit crawl, because the characters come back and there's always one more scene. And so I thought, okay, if my book, last year's book, Backlash, was a Marvel movie, and we went to credits and we came back up with one more scene, what would be really cool? What would like punch the audience like right in the chest and get them all pumped for next year's production? And so I came up with this idea that there would be this European young banker type with bodyguards in this French colonial house in Vietnam, in the third largest city in Vietnam. There'd be a terrible rainstorm lashing the windows. It'd be leaking inside, and there's $10 million on the table. And so I started writing this scene for this chapter, and I didn't know what they were dealing. I didn't know what the $10 million was for. And then I got to the end of it and I realized, oh my gosh, this guy's paying the Vietnamese intelligence officer $10 million to assemble a team of assassins to go after my main character, Scott Harvath. And so that's how I finished it up. Whatever you do, make sure you get him, because if you shoot at the king, you better not miss, kind of a thing. So if you're going to send your assassins, and the guy says, whoa, assassins, plural, I'm going to pick the best assassin, and that's who I'll send after Harvath. And the guy purchasing the contract says, no, send them all at once. And whoever gets Scott Harvath gets the $100 million. So wrote it, sent it to my editor. She loved it. She sent it to the retailer. They totally loved it. And I was like, okay, great. Now I'm done. Then I had to start writing this year's book, right? Mm-hmm. So back to the Marvel analogy, Jason, I realized, oh my God, it's part of the universe. Anything that happens on screen becomes part of the Marvel universe. Anything that happens on the published page with me is part of Scott Harvath's universe. So I had to start this year's book, Near Dark, with that same scene. So I created a prologue with that, and great, that was easy, cut and paste. I didn't have to write that first chapter in the book, but then I was like, what am I going to do? Scott Harvath he was a Navy SEAL. He's now in the espionage business. You can't find him if he doesn't want to be found. You could send 1,000 assassins after him. You're never going to find him. If he takes his cell phone and chucks it in the ocean, that's it. You're never going to track him. And I thought, good, what am I going to do? And so I reached out. Over 2 decades of being in this business, I've developed a really cool network of contacts, whether they be people at the CIA, the FBI, Navy SEALs, Delta Force, and on and on and on. And I went and talked to a few people that I really, really respect. And there's one guy who I am so glad he's on our side and not on the bad guy's side. I joke when I'm out with them. I'm like, the best day or the worst day in somebody's life is when you show up on their doorstep. It's either the best day or the last day, actually. This guy is a very, very serious individual. And I said, here's the issue. My main character has now had a $100 million bounty placed on his head. What would you do if that happened to you? Because I'm worried now the assassins are going to get him. And he goes, well, Brad, wait a second. This is your problem. You're not thinking the way we think. You're automatically thinking that Scott Harvath is the mouse. Your main character would never allow himself to be the mouse. He doesn't care that there's a $100 million bounty on his head. He's immediately going to figure out how he's going to be the cat. And he's going to reverse engineer this and go after the people that put the bounty on him. They're going to become the mice. He said, because if anybody ever did that to me, they could put a $100 billion bounty on me. I'm going to find each and every one of them, and I'm not going to stop till I put them in the ground. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the most interesting book to write. And that's what it was. But I had this kind of moment of, I don't know what I'm going to do, until this person said, again, you're not thinking correctly. If you're looking at your main character as the mouse, that's wrong. He'd never be. He's the cat regardless of the situation. Nobody can make him the mouse. And so that's a little bit of the background for the new one, for Near Dark.
Since you opened up the door to Marvel and movies, who plays your Scott Harvath?
In the film? Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is a great question. So it's funny. I was just emailing with our producer. We put together. Let me back up, and for folks out there who are longtime fans and followers of mine, you know that in a town filled with beautiful people, as Los Angeles is, I have kissed every frog in that town. Okay, I could write a book on all the twists and turns, Jason, in Hollywood. I have been left at the altar more times than Jennifer Lopez has witnessed in The Wedding Planner. I mean, it is like the Serengeti. A new executive comes in at a studio and like a lion kills all the cubs in the pride. The new executive gets rid of all the movie projects and starts afresh. But shortly before all the COVID stuff began, we got approached by one of Hollywood's top producers. And he said, these books are incredible. He said, you've got 19 with Harvath. He said, this is like the Marvel universe. We could be doing TV shows, movies, tons of spinoffs. This is incredible. I really want to make these and do it with you and put this together. And I could barely speak. I couldn't believe I was talking to this huge Hollywood producer. And I said, okay. I said, obviously the big thing here is going to be who we have as the director, who's going to help build out the vision for this and what these are going to look like. And I said, who would you have direct? And he goes, I've got 3 people in mind. He gives me the list of 3 people. And his number one guy was my number one guy. But that's great. He's got a list of 3 people. Yeah. Big deal, right? I thought it was a pretty cool coincidence that he nailed my number one guy, who's the biggest action director in Hollywood. And I said, okay, do you know him? He goes, not only do I know him, would you like to talk to him? And I'm like, yeah, I'd like to talk to him. He goes, well, let's get you on the phone with him. And he got me on the phone with him. The director was a big fan of my books, had read them, and I was quizzing him, and he had definitely read them. It wasn't just that these guys had kind of, well, tell Brad you've read all the books, Yeah. So we put this incredible thing together, and we're now, even during coronavirus and everything, we're working this through the Hollywood system, setting everything up. But we had that discussion. So this question of who should play Scott Harvath. So it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. We kind of batted back and forth this little wordplay, which is, should the star make the movie or should the movie make the star? And we all, and I sat back. I've been in this Hollywood game long enough to know that I prefer not to talk that much, because if I talk too much, then they start telling me what I want to hear. And if I'm kind of quiet, then I can listen to what I want to hear. I want to know what they're thinking, what they're doing. And so, okay, movie makes the star, star makes the movie. And they agreed with me, the star should make the movie. The same way the James Bond franchise launched Sean Connery. Nobody knew who Sean Connery was before the Bond franchise. That really made Sean Connery. And they said, what do you think? And I said, I agree 100%. And they said, we do too, because we don't want to take some actor that people know from like comedies or whatever and say, this guy's now Scott Harvath, because there's going to be a lot of people that go, well, wait a second, I remember him from that rom-com, and he was so sweet, and the girl's puppy was dying, and he helped get the puppy healthy with the vet, and he's not Scott Harvath. So our opinion is that we should take somebody who's an excellent actor, who maybe has not had their big break yet, and give that actor a huge break, because this is going to be the American version of James Bond. That's what the budgets are going to be and all that kind of stuff.
I love that. It makes a whole lot of sense, because, and some actor is going to be incredibly lucky to get that role, right?
Yeah, I've got one in mind, and I can't say his name, but I've found one who I think is just awesome. So we'll see what happens.
I'll have to ask you about that offline. So here's another one. What about Solvi?
So for those of you who have not read Near Dark yet, Solvi Kolstad is the Norwegian intelligence operative who I created to be just as good, if not better, than Scott Harvath. With a $100 million bounty on your head, it is really tough to find people you can trust. The two of them are drawn together by an event, and she helps him unravel who's after him and all this kind of stuff. It's funny, what you can't see behind me. So this is my desktop looking at me, and behind me is a white wall, Jason. And when I'm writing, I post, it looks like the movie A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, with like all the stuff. I look like I'm a madman, like some crazy guy, because I've got Post-it notes and I stick up index cards. And one of the things that I do to keep track of the characters is I find actors and actresses that I think would be great in the role, so that I've got kind of a visual on who the different people are. And so right above my computer right here was this gorgeous Norwegian who I wanted to play Solvi when we do the movie. So every day I was coming in and I was looking at her. This character, it's fun for me because I drew from the real world, the nonfiction world, for Solvi. So in Norway, in real life, they have an all-female special forces team. It was originally codenamed Tundra when they were putting it together before they went public. And then once they went public, it was called the Jaeger unit. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to create a female character as good as my protagonist, she's got to kind of chafe against the system the way he did too. So she signed up to go into this unit and she quit. And she quit because this unit had promised, you're going to go out and do these great operations and everything. And what ended up happening? All they did was take her to Afghanistan and have her meet with Taliban women, the wives of Taliban, Afghan women in different villages. And she said, no. I signed up so I could kick indoors and shoot bad guys in the head. And if you're not going to give me that, I'm out as soon as my hitch is done. And she leaves. And there is a spy master at the Norwegian intelligence service that catches her right as she's like walking out. And he's like, I heard you were leaving. You're awesome. I can give you what you want. And I can give you the opportunity to play at the level that you're really capable of playing at. So that's kind of how Solvi was created. She's got this interesting tattoo that people will see when they read the book that plays on the theme of darkness. So Near Dark is the title. There's an epigraph at the beginning of the book from Plato about darkness. Darkness is a big theme throughout the book. And one of the things I wanted to visit, particularly with Harvath, as we open up in Near Dark down in Key West, where he's really at bottom, is these people that we ask to go do these assignments overseas, it's a great personal risk that they do these things, and there's also great personal cost. So they see and have to do a lot of bad things that really kind of break you down to a certain degree. So how do you kind of cup your hands as you would around a match? How do you preserve that flickering flame of humanity inside yourself when you're seeing and going up against the worst things in the world? So that was kind of an underlying theme. So I immediately wanted to plug Solvi into that and have her have a troubled, broken past as bad as Harvath. So they're both kind of climbing out of the dark nights of despair, if you will. And I've got a terrible analogy I've used on this book tour that is just, I'm the writer. You would think I could come up with something better. I say the two of them, it's like you accidentally drop 2 coffee cups in your kitchen and you're trying to put one of the coffee cups back together. There's not enough pieces and you've got glue and you're putting this thing together and you realize you've created this Franken cup because it's pieces from both cups. And if you grab it the wrong way, Jason, you're going to cut your finger because it's jagged. But you look at this and you're like, wow, the mug is actually bigger than either of the individual ones were, and it's actually stronger. And yeah, it's ugly as hell, but it works. And so that's kind of the writer, and I should come up with something a lot more elegant than that, but that's how I see these two.
Let's workshop that a little bit.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, I love it.
See if we can get something better.
It makes a lot of sense. And so you're talking about the humanity of these characters, and I want to talk a little bit about the real people who inspire this kind of work later. But addiction plays a lot in some of these characters, whether it's Scott or Solvi, and I don't have enough information or experience with all the other characters. So can you talk a little bit about like how that factors into some of these characters' personalities and their lives?
Fabulous question. So there is a quote by Nietzsche that gets referenced in the book that it's Nietzsche's caution about beware of what happens when you battle monsters, that you don't become one. because when you stare into the abyss ends up staring into you. So the idea of the deep, deep pain that so many war fighters, be they military, be they intelligence people, who have their own stresses where they have to go into situations where they can't take any weapons because they get patted down by the bad guys when they walk in, and they don't know if they're going to walk out alive, and it's all about their wits and what they can do. There are some incredible traumas that get visited upon these people, whether it's the loss of teammates, whether it's the dissolution of marriages and families falling apart because they're constantly asked to leave their country and go overseas to fight and all this kind of stuff. So I want to explore how the pain that comes along with this job. I mean, you and I, we wrap up on a Friday, boom, we go home, we get the barbecue over the weekend, play with our kids, all that kind of stuff. These people don't necessarily have that kind of cutoff. And I'm reminded of the scene in American Sniper with Chris Kyle, where he comes back home, he's in a bar, and Taya calls him, and she's like, "What's that music? Where are you?" And he tells her, and she's like, "Wait, you're home? You're back in the United States, and you didn't come right home to me? What are you doing in a bar?" And she doesn't understand that he needs to decompress. He needs to. I read a great review of a translation of the Iliad and the Odyssey several years ago, where the translator got rid of all the repeats, used kind of current slang, and made them more accessible. And the reviewer said, these books are brilliant, particularly for war fighters, because the person who's leaving to go to war should read the Iliad so that they understand what parts of their civilized selves to leave at home before going to the battlefield. And the warfighter returning home to civil society needs to read the Odyssey so that they understand what parts of themselves to leave on the battlefield and not bring back home. So these people need to go through an airlock kind of a thing. And if they don't have a chance to spend enough time in the airlock, these things keep dragging at them, keep pulling at them. They need to be addressed. And oftentimes, the pain and the pressure are such that you do turn to substances just to quiet it down, just to get a good night's sleep, just to get a break from it. So Scott Harvath, my protagonist, and Solveig Kolstad, the Norwegian spy, have both been through so much that there was no way to assuage the pain without turning to substances. So that ability of theirs to fight back an addiction and to basically climb out of that very slippery, it's almost like falling down a well with slick rocks, that they could actually claw their way out of there, is a testament to their character. But the fact that they fell down the well shows that they're human like the rest of us. And I think that's the appeal of these characters. Again, I want you to take my book, Jason, to the lake, to the beach. It's not like, oh, this is a book about addiction. It's a thriller, but I try to make the characters human and well-rounded and that kind of stuff.
Well, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I didn't want to get too deep too fast, but frankly, thank you for giving us an escape right now, because we need it.
Welcome. Yeah.
It's been a nice diversion in the evenings to not have to watch the news and sit down and open up the book.
That's my business. I'm in the escape business. And in fact, as I've been doing my media tour, I've told people, I dare you to think about COVID when you pick up Near Dark. I dare you.
Right,
okay.
Right.
You know what? We're a big reading family. We're reading now more than ever because we're just tired of the news. There's no good news right now. And so if you can lose yourself in a thriller, that's a great thing. Any novel. If you can have an author keep your attention, because that's the number one job. I don't care if it's fiction, nonfiction, romance, historical fiction, whatever, thrillers. The author's job is to grasp, grab, and hold your attention. And I think now more than ever, I know at least in our household, we're thankful for books because they transport us. They're magic. They take us away.
I spent this afternoon taking my kids to the Sylvania Branch Library. I've got 6-year-old twins, and we picked up the bag of books that we had put on hold and took them home. And I never heard from them for the next 2 hours. They were in their playroom. Awesome. They were laying on the floor reading graphic novels. It was phenomenal. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. Speaking of current times, obviously, and you giving us an escape, how the hell do you write this kind of fiction when things are so crazy right now?
Well, so the book was written in the run-up to COVID. But what's funny
but you're not stopping writing. You're still writing. That's the thing.
No. I'm already writing the next book.
Yeah.
And several people on the tour, Jason, have said, are you going to include COVID in the next book? And I said, no. And here's why. Number one, I did a bioterrorism thing in my book, Blowback. In my novel, Code of Conduct, I actually did a pandemic. It's about 6 books ago. And it opened the very first sentence on the very first page said, the president had just been rushed to Bethesda Naval Hospital. And America realized if the president could get the virus, no one was safe. And that's how that book opens up. And it's about a pandemic. And so I've dealt with a pandemic in one of my previous novels. Mm-hmm. And now with COVID, so you're going to write about COVID? No, I'm not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole for the same reason I never wrote about bin Laden. I knew eventually we would kill or capture him. I know eventually COVID's going to burn itself out or we're going to get a vaccine. And also, I'm in the escape business, as I've said. I don't want people to pick up one of my books to escape and just be reminded of coronavirus. And let's be fair. How many spies are going to be able to wear masks and socially distance, right? I want people to remember things the way they were and the way we all want them to be again. I want 2 spies to be at a little table at a outdoor cafe in Paris or at a coffee house in Vienna. I don't want to do masks and social distancing and all that nonsense. I'm not going to do it. COVID is not going to play any role in my books. Not going to happen.
I'm getting a bug in my ear from the folks that are watching the stream saying, thank you for no COVID. I do not want to deal with it anymore.
You're welcome.
We do not need to read that in any of the future Brad Thor books. So you obviously you roll deep with the counterterrorism community. And you mentioned earlier that you've got lots of connections in very high places. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it important? Like, I don't know how that even begins. Where do you get that call? Obviously, is it you get the call because you're an incredible writer who writes about this work, or is it the other way around, or how?
So there's 2 things that we can talk about here. One is the network of people that I've built to help with the novels, and the other thing is the actual real call I got from the United States government after 9/11, asking me to come to DC to help them envision what the next attack might look like. So in the wake of 9/11, the federal government set up this incredible program called the Analytic Red Cell Unit. And they realized long before the 9/11 Commission was convened that the attacks on 9/11 happened because of a failure of imagination on our part, on the federal government's part. And they said, we are determined to never let that happen again. They were smart enough to realize that there is a certain style of thinking that happens within the Beltway around Washington, D.C., and that they needed to bring in people that thought different than the government. So they created this program and they reached out to some creative folks. I'm one. My good friend, the wonderful novelist Brad Meltzer, is another one that they invited in. Michael Bay, the director of the Transformers movies, who also did the Benghazi movie. So they invited people like us in to help them stay 3 to 4 steps ahead of the bad guys. What might the next attacks look like? Where might Americans be at risk at home and abroad? And I tell people that I got asked to be part of this. My dad's a Marine, no longer active, as I said. It was an honor for me to be asked to come serve my country, not by picking up a rifle like my father did, but by using my creativity. And I call the Red Cell program the Las Vegas of government programs, because what happens in the Red Cell stays in the Red Cell. They made it very clear that whatever you develop here stays here. You can't use it for your novels. But Brad, we want you to come because of the way you build your novels, because of the way you come up with your ideas. So in fact, it's funny, there was one attack scenario that I had developed in the Red Cell, and it happened. It happened outside the United States, and it made headlines here. And I called my person in the program and I said, okay, that's now happened. I came up with that idea. And he's like, yeah, I know. That was your idea. You told us all about it. It was a great idea. And I said, yeah, so can I go on TV and say that was something we talked about? And he goes, no, you cannot. No. We do not talk about, even if an attack happens, we don't tip the bad guys that was one of the things that we thought might come down. We reveal nothing. So that's how that went for the Red Cell program. As far as me developing my own network in this arena, I had a few things going for me. I had a godfather who was a special agent in charge in the FBI. I had a neighbor who is recently retired out of a really cool top secret unit that the Army had in the Cold War. In the Cold War, the Army went through the Ranger battalions looking for Rangers who had grown up in households where the parents spoke German. And they found these guys, pulled them out of the Ranger battalions, and taught them how to be spies, and taught them all this extra guerrilla warfare stuff, and then put them in Berlin and said, and equipped them. They had weapons caches all over the place, and Krugerrands hidden, and radio sets plastered up behind the walls and basements of beer stoops. If the Soviets ever overrun the wall, your job is to slow them down. So they did this day-to-day thing. They wore German clothing. They spoke German. They did all this stuff. Like they would have dead drops to talk to each other. And there'd be a little chalk mark on the side of this light pole. I mean, total Le Carré kind of stuff. And so I took the relationship, my godfather in the FBI, this neighbor of mine who had been in Army intelligence, and then I had one other contact with one of the original members of SEAL Team 6. A family friend worked with a great guy named Harry Humphreys, who is the technical advisor on all Jerry Bruckheimer's movies. So you see Harry's name and all the Pirates of the Caribbean stuff and all this kind of thing. And so Harry helped plug me into the SEAL community. So I bought a lot of steak dinners, a lot of pitchers of beer. And like any other business, if you want to be successful, you try to parlay relationships into more relationships. And that's how I slowly built out my network of people that I could go to and ask questions. So I got those details right in my thrillers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, having that kind of the military pedigree, you certainly, you renowned writer, and what made you decide writing as opposed to politics or military or this? And I know you had a brief interlude with some politics and.
So this is an easy question. So I can answer all of those. So like I said, my dad is a no longer active Marine. We were raised, my dad and my mom raised us, that we don't own this country, that we are merely stewards of the United States. And it's incumbent upon all of us, regardless of political affiliation, to make sure we are handing down a freer, more prosperous, more equitable, more secure country to the next generation than was handed to us. Our job is make the country better and then hand it to the next generation so they can make it better. So we took that stuff very seriously. My dad being a Marine, good character was very important. All those qualities that you want in a leader, who would you follow into battle? That was instilled in us very early on. So my dad also said, so my grandfather was the first one born in America in our family. So my grandfather was first generation, my dad's second generation, I'm third generation. And so with any immigrant family, the idea is the next generation should go further than the one before it. So the one before it places the next, if you imagine like a running track with starting blocks, the generation before is supposed to help push the starting blocks out for the next generation. So my dad said to me and my brother, listen, I went into the Marines. I had a great time in the Marine Corps. I got to go to school on the GI Bill and all this kind of stuff. But I want you guys to start further ahead than I did. My dad went into the construction real estate development business and was very successful as a real estate developer. He said, I want you guys to start sooner than I did. So my dad said three things. You're going to go to college, you're going to come out of college and go into the private sector, no military, no law enforcement. And I'm like, well, wait a second. All our friends are military and law enforcement. He said, I know, and they're wonderful people. And he said, I'm part of that brotherhood, but I did it so that you guys could start right away out of school, that you guys could go to college and then go into private sector. He said, that's the dream of our family. This is why we left the old country and came here, is so that we could enjoy all the opportunity America has to offer. So what ends up happening, my dad says to me, no military, no law enforcement. I've got tons of friends. They're all in the military. They're all cops. All my friends are. And that's what pushed me into kind of this area of being enamored of these warriors. And Stephen King had a great thing in his book on writing. He said, you should write what you love to read. So I grew up reading all the books that my parents did. They would finish a book and I'd grab it. I would go to the library and get as many books as I could in the summers, but I always look forward to when my parents would finish a Le Carre book, a Freddie Forsyth book, a Ludlum book, a Clancy book. I mean, I was reading this stuff at a pretty young age, grabbing these things. So I had this love of this genre. And so my deep appreciation and affiliation for the warrior class, be they first responders, be they in the military, be they in intelligence, and I put law enforcement in that first responder category. These are the people that I wanted to write about because I so respected and admired them. And I wanted to kind of pay tribute, particularly to those who couldn't come out and beat their chest and say, look what we did. Those quiet professionals, the ones who technically don't exist, whether at the CIA or Delta Force or SEAL Team 6 and that kind of stuff.
Living in the shadows, right? And you get to tell
Correct.
their story for them.
Correct. Yeah.
Speaking of writing, Wendy, who's watching along, asks, what kind of advice do you have for struggling writers?
Okay, so the first thing I would say to you, Wendy, is if you were at one of my events, I would ask you this question, and I can't put it directly to you and see you nod or give me an answer. I got to do it for Jason. So I'm going to pretend Jason is you, Wendy.
I'm Wendy right now.
Okay. Hello, Wendy. Do you know what the difference is, Wendy, between a published author and a non-published author?
I would say luck.
The published author never quit. You can't quit. I have, Wendy, a stack of rejections from agents. I could use it to hold open my screen door in a hurricane, okay? It's that thick. It's that thick. So that's one of the big things I say. The other thing I say is the way to get into a traditional major publishing house is through an agent. And there's it's like a phone book. It's called The Writer's Guide to Literary Agents. You can buy it from any bookstore, and probably they may even actually have it available in the library. I don't know if this resource book is there in Toledo, but this is kind of a guide of current agents that are looking for new clients. And the Writer's Guide to Literary Agents actually breaks down different genres. So you can go right to your genre. Here are the agents that are looking for what you're writing, okay? Now, here's my trick. Agents love to say you should only approach one agent at a time. I say there was no 11th commandment that Moses brought down that said you have to approach one agent at a time. That is the way they game the system, and they hate when I say this. If it takes 3 months for an agent to read your query and get back to you and say, sorry, Wendy, not interested, and you have to go through 12 agents before you finally get one, that's 3 years out of your life. So I tell young writers who are looking for representation, young writers, old writers, new writers who don't have representation, pick 5, 10, 15 agents out of this guide to literary agents that you think would be great champions for your work and shotgun them all. Hit them all at the same time. And whoever the smartest agent is the one that's going to say, this Wendy stuff is awesome. I want her. I'm going to snap her up. And they're going to grab you before the other agents even have a chance. So that'd be my advice. Those two things.
That's fantastic advice. I have a quick question for you, Brett. And I don't know if this might not be a fair question for you, but I was recently listening to a story about Hollywood blacklist and the list of scripts that had not been getting read. And there was sort of a, because of the politics, you've talked about that, and sort of the politics and the culture of LA, and scripts were not getting read, and so someone had started, this Hollywood blacklist. Like, what are you reading that's great, right? Is there anything like
John
that?
Wick. John Wick was allegedly on some list.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, John Wick was this great screenplay that was languishing, that was on some list and got made. I don't know if it's the same list that you're talking about, but I've heard something similar with John Wick. So
I was just wondering, is there something along those lines in publishing? And I don't know the answer to that.
Nope, I have not seen. I have not seen that. I mean, I'm at Simon and Schuster, and they publish me and Vince Flynn and Jack Carr, who's a wonderful new author. 3 books in, he was Navy SEAL, he became an author. I always joke with Jack. I say, God, you got the order right. You were Navy SEAL, then author. I'm an author who wants to be a Navy SEAL. I should have done it the other way. I'm too old now, Jason. I can't be a Navy SEAL at this point. Jack Carr did it the right way. No, it is. I have never in all of my years, two decades almost in publishing, seen any walls at all in publishing. Publishing is about putting out books that people love and making money doing it. So if you've got a great book, so that's an interesting question, but I have never, not only have I not experienced that in traditional publishing, I have never sat with any authors and talked to anybody that said, oh, my politics prevented me from getting a book published by Simon & Schuster or HarperCollins or anything like that. Never heard that. And I spent a lot of time with a lot of writers and a lot of people in the industry. Yeah, it's wide open. It's probably one of the fairest playing fields I've ever come across, to be honest with you.
That's interesting. Yeah. Speaking of authors and your colleagues, and you write to help us escape, what are you reading right now to escape?
So
you said the family's reading a lot.
So the family's not, so I'm not escaping. I have a very military mindset from just my dad and the people that I spend so much time with. So I see I talk about my family interactions and what we're doing as small unit tactics, right? And so right now I am reading, I love Eric Larson. So Eric, one of my favorite novels, or not novels, one of my favorite nonfiction works of all time is In the Garden of Beasts, which is about the rise of Hitler in 1930s Germany by Eric Larson. He wrote Devil in the White City, Dead Wake about the Lusitania. Right now I'm reading The Splendid and the Vile, which is all about the Blitz in London and Churchill's coming into the prime ministership and London just being pounded every single night by the Nazis. And it's for me, it's the perfect book to be reading right now because I love Churchill and I love his leadership qualities, and we're getting pounded every single day by COVID-19. So I'm looking at what the Brits were facing versus what we're facing. I'm like, oh my gosh, we've got it so easy. I'm not worried about the Nazis invading my island nation and having to fight, in my backyard against, 20, 30 Nazis climbing over the fence. So right now, Splendid and the Vile is my current read, and I love it. And Eric Larson is my go-to for history, nonfiction. Love him.
Yeah, I just made a note to check that out as well. Somebody had also asked, what are your news reading habits? Obviously, and wondering whether or not any of your connections in your network have given you kind of classified information that you might not have been in the mainstream news that you know about right now.
Nothing. So it's funny, and I've got probably the best connection in the world. A friend of mine, one of my neighbors from college, is now the national security advisor at the White House, and he just read my new book, Near Dark, and he called me a couple of weeks ago. He had just finished it. The minute the books came off the press, I told the publisher, I said, you have to get me the first one off because I want to get it to Robert at the White House. And so he read it and he called me. He's like, it was awesome. And I'm like, great. I'm so glad you liked it. And he goes, yeah, I just got one question. I'm like, what? He goes, when were you at Camp David? And I said, I was never at Camp David. And he goes, that's impossible. He said, the way you set those, there were a couple of chapters. He said, you had to have been there. And he said, okay, who do you know who works at Camp David who gave you all this information? And I said, no comment. I'm not revealing any sources. No comment. So it was kind of funny, and he laughed and everything. So I'm a voracious consumer of news. So I read stuff that's published here. So I read the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal every single day, the digital. So I'm on that every single morning. I'm reading stuff out of London. And I'm grabbing news wherever I can, because I think one of the biggest mistakes we make in this country, too many people are getting their news from Facebook, and that's very, very dangerous. And I will tell you this, is I've been warned repeatedly by people I know in the intelligence community that if you're getting your news on Facebook, you are only going to places where you're getting your preconceived notions reinforced. And that's where the Russians and the Chinese are working their propaganda the hardest, where people feel the safest because their worldview isn't being challenged. So if you pump stuff in there, they don't question it. And so particularly with older members of my family, I've been encouraging them to really break out of Facebook and particularly the chain emails that get forwarded to everybody. I've had to debunk so many of these things. So I'm on this kind of almost like World War II. Remember, loose lips sink ships. They had all these really cool posters everywhere, about what you should and shouldn't do. You shouldn't talk because the enemy may be listening. So I'm on this kind of anti-propaganda effort where I'm trying to convince at least the people closest to me so that they can convince their friends, and it'll spread out like this. Don't trust what you're seeing on Facebook. Have multiple sources. Look at different things. Challenge everything you see, because the easiest thing, it's like to go back to the Odyssey when they fell asleep in that field of poppies. There's a certain kind of narcotic effect of being in a bubble and not challenging anything, where you just pass those emails on to other people. So you can't do that. Don't be the person who forwards something without testing it.
Yep.
So my thing is don't pass it on without verifying it. So that's a big thing. So I try to grab a lot of news because there's always different takes. There's a little bit of slant here and there, but if you're looking at enough different sources, you can probably figure out what the core truth is. But it's hard. It's not easy. You have to test yourself. It's like being on a diet, not eating all the chocolate ice cream in the fridge. That's the easy thing.
I like that analogy a lot. And that's, I'll even put a plug in, for folks to support their local newspapers or, the national newspapers and subscribe, Get your subscriptions, read them at the library, whatever. But we need that kind of journalism right now, because it is not, it is essential to our future and working our way through this.
It is, and it's also essential to the body politic. So we're at a time now. This little discussion we're having could go in a time capsule, because this is a really interesting time in American history. There's a lot of divisiveness politically. There's a lot of divisiveness culturally, and our enemies outside the United States are using this. They are actually actively stoking these fires, trying to turn us against each other. And one thing I say, and this is why I love books, Jason, is because it is a shared language. If you love books, I love books. It doesn't matter if we vote differently. It doesn't matter if we're different races. It doesn't matter if we're different religions. We can sit and talk about books, our shared love of books. It's a shared language. And so I always say there's more that unites us in this country than divides us. And we need to be focused not on the divisive issues, but the things that unite us, particularly with a pandemic running through the country right now. My two big watchwords at home with my family and with my friends are patience and kindness. We're all under stress. We all need to be patient with each other, and we all need to be kind right now, because you may get an answer back on an email that seems a little aggressive or whatever, but filter it through. Everybody's under pressure. Everybody's under stress now. And now is the time for us to do good to our neighbors, to our family members, our friends, our fellow citizens. Because again, more that unites us than divides us. And that's where our focus needs to be.
Amen to that. I would love to end on that, frankly, but I have a good lighthearted question for us to wrap things up with. And it's funny because I thought the first thing when I was reading the book, that Harvat's shower process with turning the water to cold. This is something I've been doing since I was 16 years old, and mostly because I was a high school football player, and I would take ice baths to help deal with the pain, the bumps, the bruises, the sprains. And now I just every time I take a shower, I finish with a minute or two of freezing cold water, and I was like, that makes it. So what's the story behind that?
So I get it from my dad. This is my dad's thing. My dad, we jokingly refer to my dad as the great Santini. He's not the great Santini. My dad is the sweetest, funniest, toughest guy, but he's a good man. And so we joke, but that was my dad's thing. Hot shower and then cold at the end for as long as you could stand it. And that's a signature with Harvat. And it was funny because I had somebody, so I really don't do Twitter as much as I used to. In the day I decided I'm just done with Twitter, somebody had tweeted, and it was the perfect thing for me to see as I was figuratively walking out the door. Twitter is like giving a bullhorn to the dumbest person you know. And I love that about Twitter. Facebook is where I love to be because I can talk to readers and we have all these lovely conversations. The tone is so much different on Facebook, on my Facebook page than things on Twitter. But there was actually somebody before the book was released that showed up on Facebook that said, if your character does one more of those showers where he turns it to cold at the end, he said, I'm done. I'm not going to read you anymore. And I said, well, it was nice having you as a reader because it's just his signature thing. I think I've done it so many times in so many books that if I didn't do it, I would hear
Yeah.
from tons of people like, why didn't he throw the, throw it the cold at the end? So, but that's from my dad.
That is hilarious. Brad, it's been a pleasure spending time with you tonight. I appreciate that. I hope folks will pick up Near Dark. I can't tell if I've mirrored my, oh, there we go. Yeah. So
Perfect. It looks great on this end. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who joined us viewing tonight. Be well, and let me know if you're in Sylvania next time.
I will. It'd be a pleasure. We'll get together.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us, and have a good night, Brad. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.